Before implementing the slider functionality, let me explain how it's going to work. So the first thing we've got is the outer container, which is interactable zone. It is invisible and it can be any size so that the user can easily drag and click on that, which will make a good user experience. And inside we've got the actual bar. It can be any size as well, but its interactable area is going to be fixed, and inside that we can position it or size it any way we like. The fill is going to be pretty simple. We're going to position it inside the bar and give it the full width and height of its parent. And in order to move it inside the bar, we will use scaling along the x-axis with origin set to left center. In case you are wondering why we don't just use percentages width to make it easier. Well, it is because the transform property is optimized for animations and it gives the smoothest results possible. Finally, inside the bar, we have our handle, which is going to be positioned absolutely and stick to the left of its parent. In order to move, we will translate it along the x-axis based off our current value ratio, which is the current value divided by the max value. We multiply this ratio by the bar's width and translate our handle by the resulting number. Now the interesting part, how we will actually calculate our current value on which all the previous stuff relies. Let me explain. First, we will listen to mouse down and mouse up events on our interactable outer container to determine if we are dragging or clicking. And if this happens, we will calculate the mouse's X position relative to bar, which will give us the value between 0 and the bar's width. Then we can take that value and divide it by the bar's width, which will give us that ratio value that we can then use for further calculations. Now, with all of that information and concepts in mind, let's start actually building our slider. Let's open our slider.vue component. We can start off by declaring some props. So what props our slider is going to accept? It is going to accept a minimum value. Let's set it to object so that we can validate it and set the default value. We're going to set type to number, and we are going to default our prop to 0, meaning if we will not pass minimum value to the component, it's going to default it to 0. Next, we will accept a maximum value, which is going to have the same number type, and it will default to 1. Next, we're going to declare a value prop, which is the current value. It will be a number as well. Let's declare a disabled prop. This prop is going to be used to disable our component so that we cannot interact with it. This can be useful when we are just initializing and loading our video, and until that point we're going to disable our components so that user doesn't drags or clicks to anything until everything is fully loaded. Moving further, let's create our component's data object. Let's write data, make it a function that returns the data object. Inside, we're going to create one flag for now. It's going to be is dragging. We'll make it a boolean. As you may have guessed, this flag is going to be used to track if our slider is currently dragged or not. Next, we're going to create few variables that are going to be used to store our element's dimensions. The first one is handle width. Let's set it to 0. This variable is going to be used to track our handle element's width, and it's going to be updated when the window is going to resize. Next variable is the bar width. And this variable is going to hold the width of our bar. Now with those variables created, let's create a method that's going to calculate our handles and bars width. Let's go to methods. We're going to create an object and let's call that calculate dimensions. And it will not accept any prop. Inside this method, we somehow need to get our handle element and the bar element. So in order to get that in Vue, we need to create a reference to those elements. Let's go to our template. Let's find our bar and we're gonna set a ref and call it just bar. And the same thing for the handle. We're gonna set handle ref. Now in calculate dimensions method, we can grab those refs. Let's write const and destructure our bar and handle from Vue's refs object. So all of the refs are going to be stored here when our component is mounted. But for now, let's just console log our elements. Initially, when our component mounts, we want to get those dimensions. So let's create a mounted hook. This hook is going to be called when our component is actually rendered to the document. So all of our bar and handle are going to be available so that we can easily call calculate dimensions. Let's go back to our browser. Let's open inspector. Let's refresh. And here we see our object with two elements, the bar and the handle. Perfect. Let's go back to our code. Now we want to actually set our variables to the width of bar and handle. Let's remove this console. Let's set this dot handle width equals handle, and to get the width of our element, the JavaScript has offset width method. This will give the element's width in pixels. Let's do the same thing for our bar. This dot bar width equals bar dot offset width. Now if we console our width and the handle width and bar width, it's going to give the appropriate values. Handle width and this dot handle actually bar width. Let's check it out. And yeah, here is the width of our handle, which is 16 pixels, and the width of our bar, which is 1143 pixels. Perfect. Now our function is working properly. So we are now calculating our dimensions in mounted hook when our component is rendered, but also we want to keep track of our sizes whenever our window is resized. So in order to do that, we need to listen to window resize event. And the best place to listen for that is in mounted hook. After all of our content is rendered, then we are going to start to listen to our events. So let's go down here and write window, add event listener, resize, and we're gonna add this dot on window resize handler, on window resize, and we're gonna create that method here. So for now, we're gonna just console.log something so that we know if our resize event is working. Let's go back to our browser. Let's refresh. So we resize and we see our message. So everything is working properly. Now we need to call our calculate dimensions method inside our resize so that it's always recalculating. So let's put that here and we're going to console.log our bar width to check if everything is calculated. Let's go back to browser. And here, everything is recalculated properly. So if you make it really small, so it becomes 300 pixels. Let's check if it's correct. So our bar is about 319 pixels. So here it's 319. So everything works properly. Now we are going to optimize our resize callback. Right now, our callback is called every time the window resizes. But we don't want that because it's very bad for performance because we are doing some calculations. Instead, we are going to throttle our method so that it's called every 200 milliseconds. How we are going to approach that? I like to use this library called Lodash that gives you a lot of utility functions that make developing easier. So if we go to documentation and search for throttle, it gives us this function that accepts a function and accepts a millisecond delay at which it will call our function. So this is a perfect fit for our case. So we are going to install this Lodash package and import this throttle method. Let's close that. Let's go to our terminal. Now let's type npm install Lodash and -save. So it's installed Lodash. Let's go to our code. Now we need to import that throttle method in our slider. Let's import throttle from Lodash/throttle. So this is our function. And how we are going to use it. So when our component is mounted, we want to override our window resize method and create a new method that is going to be throttled. So in order to do that, in mounted we are going to say this.onWindowResize equals throttle, and we are going to pass the same function on window resize, and we are going to give, for example, 200 milliseconds. Now let's check what we've got. If we refresh, and now if we resize, as you can see, our function is called only 200, actually every 200 milliseconds, which is great. So it's not very noticeable when the resizing happens, but it gives a huge performance boost. Now with those variables set up and updating, let's make something work here. Let's go to our code. Let's go to our app view, and we're going to give some test value for our slider. Let's give it, for example, 0.75. And we are going to make so that our slider will update to 0.75. Let's go to our slider. Let's close app. Now we are getting this value prop, and we can use that to do further calculations. I'm going to create a computed object, and I'm going to create a helper delta computed, which is going to return this dot value divided by this dot max value. This is our ratio that I've explained previously in the intro. So this is going to be the value between 0 and 1. Now we can use this computed variable to calculate our fill's scale. So let's create another computed, which is called fill style, which is going to return the style declaration for our fill. So it's going to just return an object, and we will set transform origin to left center so that we are scaling our fill from left to right. And we are going to set a transform, and let's do backticks. We're going to say scale X, and here we'll interpolate our delta, which is a value from 0 to 1. This is how our scale X works. And now we can take this fill style and apply it to our fill. Let's bind style equals fill style. Now if we check our slider, it should have set the fill's width. So it's our slider here, and yeah, here is our fill. It's not visible here because it doesn't have appropriate styles, but you can see that we have a 0.75 scale, which is going to be somewhere near here, and which is correct. Now we need to apply some proper styling so that we can see our fill. Let's go to our code. Let's go to slider SCSS. We're going to target our fill. We will set a height of 100%, width of 100%. We're going to give it a background color, for example, gray color, CCC maybe. Let's set it for pink for now, so that we can actually see that. And so it kind of worked, but we see that it's chopped here. Oh, it's because our fill is scaling from the center, which means that our origin didn't set properly. So here, as you can see, it's not set. I think there is a typo. Let's check slider. Oh yeah, I've made transform instead of transform. Now it should work properly, I think. Yeah, it works properly, but it's on top of our handle, so we're gonna fix that later. Actually, let's fix that right now. Let's go to slider, and we're gonna set handles z-index to 2. So let's go back to browser. Yeah, now it's fixed. Great, now our fill works. Let's update our handle so it's also positioned right in front of our fill. We're gonna create another computed. Let's call it handle style, which is the same thing as fill style, but it will calculate the transforms for our handle. First, we're gonna grab those variables, our size variables. Let's do bar width. We're gonna grab our delta. We need our handle width, and we're gonna set it to this. So we are destructuring all of our variables. Now we will return an object and set a transform. So we will do translate X. We're gonna interpolate bar width, multiply it by our delta. This is everything I showed in the intro. As you remember, we are multiplying our bar's width by our delta value, which is from 0 to 1. And also, we're gonna minus handle's width multiplied by 0.5. I will explain why we are doing this. But for now, let me just take it out so that you can see why we are doing that. Let's just disable this ESLint for this line. And we're gonna put pixels here. So let's check the browser. If we refresh, oh, actually I forgot to assign this handle style to our handle. So let's do style equals handle style. So our handle is updated, but our handle is positioned a little bit to the right. So here is our fill. So you see the right line, but our handle is shifted to the right a little bit, but it needs to be exactly in the middle of our fill. So in order to do that, we need to shift it half of its height, half of its width to the left. So let's go to our code and let's uncomment this ESLint, and we will do minus handle width multiplied by 0.5, which will give us the half of the width. If we now go back to browser, so yeah, here it's shifted to the left, and now if we take our fill, as you can see, the right line goes right in the middle, vertically in the middle of our handle, which is perfect. Now with that setup, we can change our value and it should properly update our UI. So let's check out that. Let's go open our app view and we will set, for example, 0.3. So here it properly updates. Hooray! Now our UI is working properly. So we are going to finish at this point, and in the next chapter, we will start implementing our clicking and dragging functionality so that we don't hard code our value, but update it. So we let the user to update that. So thank you for watching and see you in the next chapter.